Hello and welcome to Health Tech Builders. Here we explore the business of health innovation through real stories from leaders in the trenches, the wins, the failures, and everything in between. You will get insights and practical advice to help you build and lead in health tech. I am your host, Rodrigo Hute. Hello everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Pelu Tran. Pelu is the founder and CEO of Ferrum Health. Ferrum Health is a health tech company that offers an AI platform designed to streamline the deployment of clinical AI solutions within health systems. In short, Ferrum aims to democratize healthcare AI. Pelu, thank you so much for being here today and welcome to the podcast.
Rodrigo, thanks for having me. It's really an honor.
I'm super excited about this episode. We are all trying to learn about what's going on in AI and in particular the applications of AI in the healthcare sector. Everything is moving so fast. In fact, I believe, at least in my case, I think that we are drowning in information and at the same time starving for wisdom. So my goal today is to really talk about what's the difference between what's real, the reality versus the noise, and how do we make sense of everything that is going on right now with AI in the healthcare industry. So the first question that I would love to ask you is how do you make sense of all of it? And do you have a framework, a mental model or a framework that helps you make sense of everything that is happening right now with AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you look at the actual figures around how much AI is available in the US today, you're looking at something like 200 plus AI models getting approved by the FDA every year. There are over 1,000 FDA-cleared models out there in the market. And the average hospital is really only using 2 or 3 typically. So you've got 0.2, 0.3% of possible AI that doctors could be using actually being used. So I think it's very much blue ocean still as an industry where most AI opportunities, most solutions are not being deployed at most places. And so the framework that we use is a little bit different than most people, where there's been a lot of talk about what AI does, whether it's a agentic chatbot, whether it's a ambient listening solution, whether it's a lung nodule or breast cancer finder. But I think what gets under-recognized is the where, how, and why of AI, which is where is it being deployed into which workflows, which clinical use cases, which patient journeys, the broader context of the AI model, not just its prediction, but how the prediction leads to downstream care or patient impact. There's the who, which is actually, is this being used by a doctor, a nurse, a tech, and how is it actually affecting the workflow? And there's a why, which is really the measurement of downstream clinical and business impact. And I think there's a real focus of AI today on what is the ROC curve, right? What is its performance against the ground truth that you have in some clinical study, that you have 3 radiologists maybe label a study, you see how close AI is to those 3 radiologists. The reality is that 80% of AI tools underperform in the real world compared to their FDA clearance. So a company will get an AI approved on some population, they'll deploy it into a very different population, very different workflow, and they'll just get fundamentally different results. And so we think about it as really 80%. And so we think about it as really, you have to think of AI in the context of a very complex healthcare system. And you need to actually be measuring not necessarily the AI outputs and ROC curves and confusion matrices that everyone looks at, the kind of IT or model ops metrics, but you need to actually be integrating AI into your corporate data governance as a CIO and thinking about its connectivity into downstream impact, business metrics, value that's being generated to clinician productivity or patient outcomes. And really very, very few people are actually doing that work of connecting the AI models that are outputting insights and actually seeing how those insights ultimately actually affect the business.
Yeah, that's very very interesting, and I guess that we are, that's also happening because we are in the early innings of its development, not the technology per se, but the adoption. But where does Ferrum Health fit into this evolving landscape? And maybe it's a good segue to describing what your company does, and also more specifically, what core problems are you solving at this time?
So you can think of Ferrum as a governance platform that supports healthcare organizations that want to take their AI not from 0 to 1, but from 1 to 100. And the difference there is that over the past 5 to 7 years, we've gone from individual point solution applications being the focus of most healthcare AI buyers. So when they're looking at a show floor, they're at HIMSS or RSNA or a healthcare conference, they're kind of jumping from point solution to point solution and trying to decide which one of these 50 or 100 point solutions can I prioritize deploying this year? And the cadence is usually something like that. It's one application every 12, 18 months from start to finish that they're able to turn on. And it's because there's this $500,000, $700,000 cost to a large health system of implementing any single new vendor. So they'll do that once or twice. They'll implement a stroke solution, or they'll implement some sort of note summarization tool from a different vendor. They'll spend $500,000 year one and hundreds of thousands of dollars years 2 onwards. And they'll realize that they have another 50 applications that their doctors want to be using. And I think that's the point at which Ferrum comes in and says, listen, you are clearly past the point where you need an individual point solution to be deployed. You really need to think about this from an end-to-end AI lifecycle and from a governance standpoint. How does your enterprise actually build towards this vision of an AI-connected enterprise where you're able to deploy AI in all the hundreds of different places that you want to deploy? That includes infrastructure, it includes clinical insights, it includes business intelligence, but it's all the services and software that sits around a specific AI model that makes it actually generate business value that we help hospitals with.
Yeah. How many customers do you currently serve?
We're at over 400 clinical sites. Sorry. We're at over 200 clinical sites around the US and internationally. Those include some really marquee names: Sutter Health, Allina Health, Carle Health, Presbyterian, and others.
So is it mostly large healthcare systems and hospitals, or do you also work with SMB customers, providers?
Yeah, we do. But one of the natures of a platform is that the more AI applications you want to plug into it, the more value there is. And so large enterprises that really have a need for end-to-end governance of these models have kind of an ecosystem with many, many dozens of stakeholders. Typically, they're the ones seeing the most value. But the SMB, the smaller radiology practices or clinician groups, they absolutely don't have the resources to actually support the massive universe of AI tools that are on the market. So we've got value proposition to both.
So when I think about AI and its applications and use cases in the healthcare industry, at least 4 things come to mind. Automation for admin workflows, right? Like doctor-patient interactions and transcribing those conversations and interactions. The second one is clinical decision support, like helping doctors make better clinical decisions. The third one is AI to develop new drugs and find new targets and biomarkers and all of that. And then finally, diagnostics. Those are the kind of the broad areas that I have been able to map out. Is that accurate, or am I missing something?
That's accurate. We think about those kind of points 2 and 4 are front of house, and points 1 and 3 are back of house. So it's basically AI that's being used on the hospital's patient base to actually change clinical decision making and patient outcomes, or AI that's being used to drive efficiencies. So we bucket into those two, and within those two, there can be a lot of overlap, right? A solution that's used to help move patients through a stroke protocol will have a massive impact on bottom line, and it'll also require some significant changes within the admin staff and workflows. But yeah, generally front of house is AI relating to patient care that runs usually on patient data. Back of house is usually administrative. And I guess we think a lot more and are a lot more excited about front of house because we're all patients, and the quality of care that we're receiving really is nowhere close to what it could be for any of us. But I think back of house ends up being where a lot of AI is focused on today, because hospitals are so pressed for cash, reimbursements are declining, productivity is going down, there's workforce shortages, kind of the operational issues in healthcare are actually the ones that are burning the most for most organizations. But what that's causing is a lack of ability to actually support the solutions that actually impact patient care. Right? If you can do one AI model a year and you're implementing a revenue cycle model to help you bill more to patients, you're not going to implement that breast cancer AI tool that could potentially find hundreds of additional patients that need intervention. So we exist very much in a zero-sum game where while hospitals have to choose a single tool to deploy every year, yeah, they're choosing the productivity, the back office stuff that addresses immediate pain points. But that means that those 1,000 AI tools that are out there in the market for every major indication, disease diagnosis, clinical decision that needs to be made, like all of that value, all of those patient outcomes are kind of just being left to sit on the shelves. I think that's really why we founded Ferrum.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation, and that's also what I've been noticing. I think that most traction it has been around the admin automation. Clearly, and I had a conversation with a number of doctors over the last few months. And we were talking about AI and all the new tools and the innovation that is going on in this space. And a couple of doctors told me, and they said, hey, Rodrigo, if you really want to help me, yes, AI, it is definitely interesting and it's changing how we're going to be working. But if you want to help me today, my two biggest pain points have to do with talent. As you mentioned, like there is a labor shortage, and I need more help, and I need more physician assistants and nurses and so on. And secondly, I need to then empower my teams to be more productive and reduce burnout. So he said, I love AI, I love the technology and the innovation, but if you really want to help, my two biggest pain points are I need more talent, I need to reduce their burnout and productivity. So it kind of makes sense that this automation, admin automation workflows for AI, and I think two companies come to mind, like Suki, a Breach, those kind of ambient AI solution tools are gaining some traction. But what I am personally most excited about, it's all the things around clinical decision making, and also drug development as well. But in the clinical decision support front, I think that's where the biggest potential impact on humanity we could potentially have. Are you seeing any interesting development on the clinical decision support side of things, or are we still very early in that space?
So I think we've moved from, in 2018, there were probably 70 to 100 AI models that were FDA cleared for clinical support. And the average hospital used somewhere between 0 and 1. And fast forward 6 years, you have gone from 70 to 1,000 AI models that have been approved. and the average facility is using 2 or 3. And so it really has to do with a bandwidth issue where so long as facilities have to pick a single model a year that they're able to support, yeah, they're going to do the ambient listening. And the next year, they're going to do the revenue cycle. And the year after, they're going to do the scheduling. And they're only going to ever do the bare minimum to honestly try to deploy the most mind-numbingly obvious ROI solutions. And I think that, as I said, really is going to prevent all of the clinical AI solutions from being adopted. So you've got to fix this friction to AI solution adoption. And that friction comes from IT. It has to do with the fear around patient data security and privacy. What AI models are doing with my patient records. Do I need to consent my patients to send their data to OpenAI? Probably, increasingly so. But then it also has to do with the cost to implement those solutions, even when you have their sign-off security. So it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars for the average AI solution. And that's one vendor. And then once you do that, you've kind of gotten over your security fears for AI, which many hospitals can't. You've ensured the IT resources are available. And now you discover that 80% of these AI models don't perform. And so you actually probably turn off half of all the AI tools you turn on within the first year. And guess what? That costs you another $500,000 to deploy the next solution that replaces it. And so really, that's the issue. The issue is the massive amount of friction to take a single step forward in healthcare. And that's because hospital IT teams are not good at assessing security of vendor clouds. They're not good at understanding how data operates in the AI world. They're not good at doing the data science around determining, is an AI model biased on my patient population? Does it perform the same way that I need it to? Is it leading to the business outcomes I want? None of those questions are things that hospital IT teams can ask effectively. And so I think that's where we come in. We really think that if you give hospital executives the tools and governance systems that they need to basically say, listen, I can press a button, turn on an AI tool, I can test against my population, I can have that tool running on my own data center or cloud, and I can monitor it going forward so that if it ever starts to slip up, I have immediate awareness of it. Those are the reasons why AI isn't being adopted. And if you solve them, actually what we found is hospital systems do deploy 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 AI models across the organization. And they have another list of 10, 15 models that they want to deploy after that. So I think the demand's there. Even the ROI on these AI models is already there. But it's just not going to be as massive if I'm just looking at lung cancers as it will be if I'm doing some administrative tool that helps my doctors document. The ROI in the admin tools is always going to be massive. It's always going to be top of the bucket. But if you add up all these individual AI applications on the clinical side, their impact is actually measured in the millions of patient lives per year. Just each individual one just does not rise to the top of the stack.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One thing that has been very interesting to me. It's the area of diagnostics, and there is been quite a lot of evidence around, AI-powered diagnostics, for example, in radiology and similar areas. What are the biggest challenges in diagnostics? And one thing that I keep hearing, it's if these tools are getting so smart and so good, these AI tools could potentially replace, for example, radiologists, or are they really going to be like a co-pilot for these specialists?
Yeah, I don't even think of them as co-pilots, but it's funny because, again, 5-7 years back, when you looked at radiology AI, there was all this fear that these tools were going to replace the radiologist, and they weren't that great back then. There's been a lot of advancement. You look at it now, and these tools are incredibly powerful. They're better than radiologists in many instances, but you actually don't really hear much about radiology being replaced. And the reason has nothing to do with all the radiologists magically being okay with technology. It has to do with the fact that there aren't enough radiologists anymore. So they're no longer afraid of their jobs. AI today can do a ton of the radiologist's job. There are probably multiple study types, tuberculosis screening, extremity fractures. There's a lot of study types that you probably could just have AI do. Doctors don't want to do. They're probably losing money on these very basic studies. But the reason why AI is not going to replace doctors has nothing to do with doctors. It's actually just liability. It's credentialing. It's at some point the decision has to fall on some clinician. And that's never going to change in the next 5, 7, 10 years. So guess what? Doctors are going to become more and more editors of AI outputs. They're going to have AI running on everything, and their job is going to be to parse and combine and determine which AI results are reliable and which ones actually reach a patient, and that's fine. But the amount of data that the average radiologist has to look at, the number of pixels, has gone up 15-fold in the past decade, I think. Their eyeballs haven't gotten 15 times more efficient at looking at those pixels. So we're already, I think, seeing a deterioration of care quality that's arising from this reduction in workforce in clinicians combined with an increase in data that's being generated in healthcare. Those two are inarguable forces. So the only possible thing that could happen there is that quality declines. We just aren't tracking it. We're not measuring it. We're not really paying attention to it. But I think that that's something that's happening that has led radiologists to be okay with it, is a recognition that it's no longer humanly possible to do the things that they're being asked to do.
That's right. And I think that AI has the potential to make doctors super doctors in a way, right? It's medical information, I think it quadruples every 6 months or so. So by having these tools, instead of, I would agree with you that I don't see a near future where these tools will replace the doctors. At the end of it, whether it's reliability or biases, from the platform. So I think that some of these tools will help, physicians make better decisions, but at the end of the day, they have to also do the work. So yeah, that's very interesting. What's your perspective on consumers and patients using ChatGPT, other AI tools, just to kind of not self-prescribe, but self-diagnose and understand a little bit more what's happening? And I have a little story, personal experience when I went to see a doctor. They asked me to go to the lab and do some blood work, and and then it took me quite a lot of time to be able to find a new appointment to go and see my doctor. So in the meantime, I uploaded the lab results, onto ChatGPT, and I said, hi, I'm, Dr. Rodrigo, and I'm trying to understand my lab report and blah, blah, blah. So I started asking a bunch of questions, and I thought it was pretty good. The kind of information that I got back, and I was better prepared. And when I went to see the doctor, I went with like 10 questions. And the doctor was like, "Whoa! Like, are you a doctor?" And I said, "No, I'm not a doctor. I just used ChatGPT before coming to see you." What's your take on consumers' use or patient use, and what do you like and what don't you like about this?
I honestly think that this is already happening. I mean, we were already using WebMD. We were already Googling stuff. Like that ship sailed. I think that there is going to be a need for these tools to be more integrated with the patient record, because patients are just taking their lab tests. They're taking these one-off data points and they're feeding it into ChatGPT, which on the one hand, don't love the data security policies, kind of the data privacy policies that most of these AI LLMs have. So there's a question there just for patients, right? You feed it some lab data, now, somewhere in the embeddings, it knows you have diabetes. That's not great. And so I do think that there's a role in making these tools available through the providers rather than having them be just out in the wild through whichever DeepSeek API the patient happens to be sending it to. So there's value to having it be a tool that's offered by hospitals that connects to the patient record. But I think that in terms of using it the way patients have been using it, like that was already happening. Like I was already sending the WebMD results to my mom to have her talk to her doctor about this stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about providers and the provider landscape. And one question that I wanted to ask you is about their concerns. What are the most common concerns or objections regarding adopting AI and adopting AI tools when you work with your clients?
It really comes down to three big things. It's the security of the tools, its selection of the tools, and it's the safety of the tools. So I think every provider is overwhelmed with the number of applications that are out there, and they have no idea how to figure out which way is up. Even when they're looking at models that they know the clinicians want, there is real large hesitancy around integrating with a lot of these cloud AI APIs, right? They don't really know where the data is going. They don't know how it's being used. The most common cause of cybersecurity breach and ransomware attack in a hospital is through vendor backdoors. And so if they have to open up a port for every AI vendor that they're working with for every AI model, like that's probably the hospital's largest security exposure of all their solutions. And then the last one is safety. It's the fact that these tools don't perform, they drift over time. They are almost by definition going to be biased because the chance that the population that a hospital system is serving exactly mirrors the population that a model was trained on is basically zero. So there's going to be changes in performance. So I think those three are the three big causes of hesitation that we see in healthcare. Again, you'll know like it has nothing to do with the AI model, not performing or it not having value or there not being enough, right? It really has to do with that last mile of we know there are solutions out there. Are they secure? Which one do we use? Are they safe for our patients? How are we monitoring them? Like that's really the cause of all this delay.
So they are aware and potentially overwhelmed with so many solutions. So when you come in, what's your process or framework? When you work with clients, how do you help them choose what tool is the right one for them?
The only way to choose is to actually run it on your own population. You can look at any number of studies or clearances or do any amount of peer testimonials, and the AI solution could still fail. Like maybe you're using Philips scanners and the trials run on Siemens scanners, or maybe your clinicians use certain wording that other clinicians don't. There are all these ways that these AI tools fail. And so our view is you got to make it as low cost as possible for a doctor to try a tool that they want to use. Ideally, any AI tool, it can be downloaded and run on a patient record the same way you or I download an app on our iPhone. And with Ferrum, that's possible, but without a governance platform, without the sort of IT solutioning around AI, like it is, as I said before, just super burdensome. So I think you gotta realize that you have to eliminate the barriers to being able to test a model on your own data. It means that you need to basically have a platform in place that allows you to test these tools without needing to go through the full enterprise contracting and security process for each tool.
Yeah. So it's in a way, it's like doing small pilots, in a safe space, prior to, and then how do you solve or mitigate this lack of trust and privacy, and what else can you say about that?
Yeah, so people often talk about on-prem versus cloud, this kind of data center versus cloud environment. But I think that the more important distinction to make to solve this problem is the AI running at the vendor or at the client? Are these models sitting in the vendor cloud environment, and the hospital has to send their patient data to the vendor, allow the vendor to send it back, and then reintegrate it. Vendor clouds, one, place a lot of burden on the hospital IT team. They're less secure because you've got patient data flying around, and they end up actually being less performant and less reliable because there's just a lot more moving pieces. The better way to do it is deploy the AI into the client's environment, right? That could be the hospital system's data center. It could be the health system's cloud environment, but giving them a way to run these AI models within their firewall on infrastructure that they support, adjacent to their existing patient records, like that is very, very, very clearly the more cost-effective, secure, reliable, transparent way to run these tools. The issue is that virtually every AI vendor that's out there, their deployment model is the vendor cloud, right? They say, listen, it's easier for me to offer my solution as an API and put all the work onto you at the hospital. And so most of them default to that approach. There needs to be a change in the market because hospitals do have all the power. They do have all of the ability to decide what to buy. And they are increasingly telling vendors that they just spent $20 million on a cloud environment. That vendor needs to run in that cloud environment. They can't have it operating in a public cloud manner that consumers can because of all of the safety and security considerations in healthcare. I think there's going to be a shift from public cloud, vendor cloud, towards client cloud or customer cloud. That shift is going to be made by the hyperscalers. It's going to be made by the hospitals insisting on it. And it's going to be made by the fact that it's just a lot cheaper and more reliable to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that comes to mind is, what additional issues come with, the the workflow integration. So you mentioned about where the data sits, the trust, the reliability of the data, but then you also have to have these integrations with electronic health records and many other potential platforms that they use internally. How do you go about doing that? I mean, you mentioned that health systems IT teams might not have or the expertise or the time or the bandwidth to do all of this. They already have full-time jobs, and now you're throwing at them a lot of new AI tools that they have to try and test. So what have you seen that works? And when you advised a client, maybe this is a good segue to talk about a case study or a successful case study of from one of your clients.
Yeah, I think that there is a little bit of a split in the market where a lot of healthcare is conservative, and so a lot of hospital systems are still thinking about AI as something that is buying a bag of toys for their doctors. Thankfully, more and more of them are realizing that AI is kind of a core technology capability now, the same way that EHR or digital films in radiology were. It's not really a fun luxury that expensive academic centers do to have an innovation edge. It's not like a Da Vinci robot, but it's basically, especially for these tools that have direct impact on business, like it's kind of a core competency that they need to develop. So that shift is still early. I would say, probably 2/3 of all health systems and providers have some sort of AI council, some sort of AI governance function. Most of them are still thinking about it in terms of a holding pen for clinician requests for AI, but more and more of them are thinking about it in terms of a organization that's job is to try to drive the health system towards becoming much more AI connected and being able to support AI across the enterprise. So that shift in mindset is something we really look for, and we're seeing a lot more of it. And that's actually the biggest predictor of success, is if the IT sponsors, the IT champions, the administrators actually think about AI as something that they have to do, or are they looking for reasons to say no to every AI model that's being requested?
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my follow-up question about like when you approach a health system or a potential client, who are the key decision makers? Is
Yeah.
it how much is the clinicians versus the C-level executives at these companies?
Yeah, it used to be bought at the departmental level. So it used to be chair of radiology or orthopedics or emergency medicine buying each tool and turning them on and doing it kind of within their budget without having this whole corporate conversation. I think that has resulted in a lot of inefficiency at the enterprise level, because now you have IT having to support 15 different applications in 15 different departments, none of which are running the same way, and that's a nightmare. Healthcare systems just spent the past 10 years in what's called application rationalization, which essentially means they're looking across the enterprise saying, hey, listen, why do we have 5 different documentation tools or 3 different revenue cycle tools? Let's figure out which one's best. Let's combine everyone onto one of them. Let's negotiate a much better pricing around it. And then let's deal with the savings that come from that. We just did that. They've just finished that process for their enterprise. And now you've got 1,000 AI tools that they need to implement. So I feel like there's a lot of exhaustion, but the buyers can't be the departments in the long term. The buyer of an AI governance platform, the buyer of AI has to actually be at the enterprise, the CIO, the chief data officer, the chief medical officer, and the stakeholders involved are the departments, that are clinicians. But I think that health systems, they want a single contract that they can buy every AI model on. They don't want to have 20 contracts with 20 vendors. They don't want 20 integrations. They want one integration. They don't want 20 different IT dashboards or clinician interfaces. They want one interface for the doctors. They want one dashboard for their IT. And so there's all of this AI rationalization that's occurring that is moving purchasing from individual clinicians, departments, up into the executive level. And the key here is that usually means that it slows down. It usually means that a sales cycle goes from 3 months to 18 months because now it's an enterprise thing. The key is that with AI, you can't have that happen either. You need to have an executive buying, but also have an acceleration of adoption. And that's just impossible unless the executives are thinking about it in terms of an AI enablement approach, right? Like they're saying, hey, listen, we want to eliminate friction to adoption so that we can make these purchases, we can test these applications that our doctors want, and we're looking at, instead of 1 application a year, 10 applications a year.
Yeah, it sounds like it's getting to the top of the agenda, for C-level executives at health systems, and and then switching gears a little bit about, let's talk about ROI, and how do health systems measure ROI when implementing a tool, an AI tool. You mentioned that most of these health systems have been, using point solutions over time, and now they are rationalizing, the different tools to keep kind of the winner, if you will. But what's the process for them to decide this is the good one, here's the ROI, and what kind of metrics do they typically pay attention to?
Yeah, it's honestly changed over time. And it, of course, depends upon, are you talking about productivity solutions, back office solutions, or clinical solutions? But I think that the ROI conversation is a little misleading, because did the EHR have an ROI? Did the data warehouse have an ROI? Right? Most of these foundational technologies that are used in clinic, they're used because they're the standard of care in healthcare. They're not used because they drive ROI. Do I think a lot of AI tools have ROI? Do they drive productivity? Do they drive more efficient decision making? Do they drive more downstream revenue? Like, those are all big categories of ROI. But the primary driver for a lot of these solutions, especially the clinical ones, is just a stated need and pain around a certain step in patient care. Like we have way too many musculoskeletal x-rays. Our doctors are taking forever to read them. Patients are waiting in the ED, and it's a much more subjective and operational pain point that they have, rather than saying we can generate more money because this AI tool we can bill for. So I feel like, yes, they need solutions like Ferrum that can help them measure downstream impact, help them measure productivity, how long are patients waiting in the waiting room, how many patients do they see in their ED. Like there are these operational metrics that need to be measured to ensure that an AI tool is having the impact you want to have. But I think the selection of an AI tool, like the pain points are kind of obvious for most systems. They know what is the biggest pain in the doctor's butt. And that's why they're asking for the AI tool. I feel like that's changed a bit, because it used to be hospital systems wanted just like perfect spreadsheets proving out the model and at-risk contracts for impact. And I feel like now it's just a recognition. Now we just need to be turning AI on. It's not an option for us not to be AI enabled. I think that's important, because I don't think most other technologies in healthcare had such a high bar for adoption. I can't think of another one that has. But somehow we have this expectation that AI needs to be just extremely rigorous and proven out ROI, and both improving value and driving bottom and top line. And it's like no other IT purchase has had this. And so I think it's more of an excuse to not act than it is an actual reason why they can or can't adopt.
Right. And also I would imagine that it's becoming a strategic imperative, for a whole health system, the whole organization. And I would imagine that, the CEO has to incentivize, people in the right way to make sure that they implement something like this beyond what's the ROI, what's the number, what's the metric. If it's a foundational, strategic, initiative. As you mentioned correctly, it goes beyond the metric per se. Let me ask you about regulation, a little bit about regulation, and let's imagine for a second that you work for the government, and you work at the government, and you are thinking, you're tasked to think about how you could potentially regulate AI in the healthcare system. What are some of the things that you would propose, and let's contrast with what are the things that you would propose versus what are some of the things that are happening right now? Maybe there is an overlap or not.
I mean, so AI today, clinical AI, is being regulated the same way a medical device or a drug is being regulated. And the problem with that is I can run a clinical trial on a patient population for a drug, and I can get a result. And in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like that drug is probably going to still have the same result on the population. Right? The hip implant is not going to magically be different 10 years from now than it is today. And so FDA has operated in this golden image model, right? You approve a device or a drug with very, very specific performance characteristics, and that has been approved. The issue with AI is that I could approve an AI model today, and in 3 months or 6 months, it could drift wildly and just start underperforming, because the data set, the population, AI is much less stable than a device or a drug. The problem is that our regulatory mechanisms were built around regulating very stable healthcare interventions. So that really should change. There really should be a way for AI to continuously improve, for models to be continuously monitored. The closest we have today to that is this post-market surveillance that we implement. So an FDA approves a drug, they'll still keep monitoring it to see if it's leading to unexpected side effects. But that process doesn't really make sense the way it's structured today. So need to somehow revisit how FDA regulates software. It's going to require an act of Congress. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime in the next few years. And so until then, the only answer is if regulators aren't going to be able to provide a viable path to ensure the safety of these tools, it kind of has to be the hospitals. Right? The users of these tools have to make sure that the tools they're using is safe. So I think how you would change it, it would be enabling this continuous improvement and version control almost of AI models without needing a whole new FDA submission. It would be implementing initially optional but eventually mandatory reporting programs for AI adverse events, the same way we do for drugs. But then ultimately, I still think that even in that scenario, the burden of these AI tools being monitored or measured still falls to the providers. I don't think there's any regulation that you can put in place that removes the responsibility of ensuring the safety of these AI tools from the providers. Because at the end of the day, your patient population is going to be different than everyone else's. And there's no way that a government regulator or a company is going to be able to figure that out without your help.
Is there a scenario where Ferrum Health could be a third party to help the government regulate this thing? You're not the provider, you're not going to be the one treating patients, but you're helping these institutions to deploy AI, and you will have a lot of data, or you have a lot of data. So have you think about that?
Yeah, I think that there are both regulators that want this data, and there are trade groups that want this data. So you've got CHI or AdvaMed or American College of Radiology that all are trying to stand up self-reporting mechanisms and AI scorecards and AI assurance labs for all of this. And you've got FDA and CMS and these other governmental bodies that also want to be regulating. So I think that the missing piece in all of this is reporting, right? Actual monitoring, measurement, governance, measurement of impact. And so the role of a player like us is to, one, shape what metrics are being requested by these health system regulatory bodies, and then two, to make sure that we're playing nice with them, right? Like we have to have integrations with both trade organizations that are taking care of this, as well as with regulatory bodies that want these registries to exist, but they need to figure out, working with us and others, which data is most important. And they need to actually mandate that monitoring systems like Ferrum and others get put in place to actually generate this data. Because right now, unless you're working with us or another data science consultancy to figure out your AI performance, you're just not measuring it. And so there's nothing to report.
Yeah. Let me shift gears and talk a little bit more about Ferrum and your business model. My understanding is that Ferrum operates as a kind of a managed marketplace. Correct me if I'm wrong, but connecting AI vendors with healthcare systems, right? So like any other two-sided marketplace, you have kind of buyers and sellers. How do you ensure, both having the right vendors, right, the right supply, and also making sure that you have the right kind of demand, right, the buyers and sellers. And in my experience, like running marketplaces in the past, you need volume, you need density, and you also need liquidity, right? If you think about Amazon or any other marketplace. So how do you think about building a managed marketplaces, and what are some of the critical success factors for your business model?
I think it's almost a built-in flywheel. And so one of the things that's been very evident about AI is that as these models, foundational technologies, right, whether that's a foundation model or whether that's a neural network of a more traditional type, like it is getting easier and easier to build AI models for any given use case. And so the barrier to entry for a new AI tool is getting lower. the barrier to entry for deploying it has kind of been the same. So it's all about same thing as before. Like you've got to bring that barrier to deployment, that last mile, as down as possible. We actually believe that the marketplace concept, this sort of grocery store for AI, is actually not the right way to think about it. And I think you've seen this because of really the lack of adoption of marketplaces over the past decade, honestly, of AI. And it's because a marketplace places all of the burden on the clinician for figuring out which tool I want to buy, like how do I deploy it. It's a lot of running into the same issues that have prevented adoption in the past. Rather than just giving them a selection of applications, the goal is, hey, listen, whatever tool a hospital wants, they should be able to bring it on board on their own infrastructure, right? So it's actually about, hey, when there is a new model that a hospital wants, let's make sure that it's as easy as possible for them to bring that vendor on. And so vendor onboarding, giving a diverse set of environments that vendors can deploy into, right? Any cloud environment, any one of the hyperscalers, on-prem deployments, both containers and virtual machines, right? Multiple GPU support, like all of these things that make a platform truly vendor neutral, but also make it sort of compute/deployment neutral for a vendor needs to be there. So for us, a big part of our focus is how do we eliminate friction for vendors as well that want to make their application available for a customer that may want it without telling them, hey, listen, you right now you're running AWS. I need you to port all of your software and all of your infrastructure over to Google Cloud so that I can deploy you. Like you've got to enable and deploy in whichever environment they want while still giving hospitals sort of governance and end-to-end monitoring and surveillance that they need. So a large part of our team is focused on just eliminating that vendor friction so that any hospital can go to any vendor, whether they're on our platform or not, and have that vendor working within this broader governance framework, within all of the other benefits that Ferrum offers, without needing to spend a ton of time or having a ton of reasons to say no. So that's how we think about it. Much more in vendor enablement, as well as hospital enablement, and the platform that supports all of that.
I love that vendor enablement. That's kind of in a way you're kind of the facilitator, the matchmaker, the team that makes things happen in the AI world.
And one thing I'll just add on to that is like developers of AI models, like they don't like maintaining HL7 and DICOM interfaces. They don't like having to stand up single tenant dedicated cloud environments for each customer. Like they don't like having to be called at 8 p.m. when their AI model goes down. Like their job is not to be a healthcare infrastructure company any more than the hospital's job is to be an AI developer. Yeah. And so I think that ultimately the vision is just let AI model developers focus on what they're good at, take care of the hospital IT stuff that they're not good at, and everyone benefits. Developers do too, right? They have higher margin businesses without all the support and infrastructure. They have more reliable implementations because they're not having to moonlight as a hospital IT company, and they actually have more budget to put into developing better tools. So I think this isn't a case where the middleman makes both sides worse. It truly is something that developers, I think, really are starting to value.
Absolutely. How do you think about a company a company like Accenture, right? Historically, Accenture, Deloitte, and all of this, they are part consulting, consulting firm, part systems integrators. How do you think that those big companies are thinking about this? Is there a scenario where Ferrum Health it's competing against those guys who are trying to advise, serve, implement new technologies?
There's a little bit of a conflict of interest around that. I think of it like how one of the reasons why legal tech and legal AI can struggle is because law firms bill hourly. And so if you make it more efficient to do the same amount of work, like there's almost a disincentive to deploy these. I think similarly, modern AI governance platforms make all of these Accenture and Deloitte projects much more efficient, where they can support and deploy and turn on an AI agent in 150 hours of consulting time rather than 1,000. And I think that right now, those two companies are the two biggest Gen AI companies by revenue in the world, right? They're making hand over fist amounts of money. So while that's the case, I don't know that there's a ton of uplift that we would see from their adoption of us. But I think over time, health systems can't keep paying Accenture $10 million to turn on a new AI tool every time they want to make a step forward in AI. So I think they have a great business model now. I think that it's going to start to be disrupted, not necessarily by us, but by hospitals that are just doing it better. And I think that the default way of deploying an AI model is in 5 years and 3 years is not going to be Accenture. It's going to be through a platform. And at that point, yeah, Accenture, Deloitte, they probably should be working with folks like us to provide solutions and to provide consulting services, because guess what? There still is a lot of change management. There still is IT work things. There's a lot of work around platforms like ours that still needs to exist within the hospital that these consulting firms would be great at. But right now, I just feel like there are enough hospitals that are willing to just say we need to do AI and throw executive budgets at it, that I feel like that's probably the right thing for them to focus on in the near term.
Interesting. How do you think about your go-to-market strategy, for Ferrum Health? And, you're selling into hospitals, large health systems, national, regionals, and so on. And, selling to these clients, you've mentioned this earlier, it can be complex, time consuming. The sales cycles are potentially getting longer. So how would you describe your go-to-market strategy, and what has worked and what hasn't worked in terms of acquiring, retaining clients, your customers?
I think the single most important thing that we've discovered is everyone's talking about AI, and that does not mean that everyone's ready to buy AI. So understanding that there are health systems that want to start making AI a strategic competency for their organization. They want to be able to actually make the investments necessary to do so. And there are others that just want to talk and want to get free advice on reasons why they shouldn't be using AI today. And so there's just a very clear difference in the market between those two. And frankly, that's probably the most important thing we can ask. If a health system or if a provider is actually wanting to make AI a reality, they very quickly realize that they can't do it by going from one point solution to another point solution to another. They very quickly realize that they need a platform partner and a strategic partner to actually help them manage lifestyle and governance. So that discovery is, I think, what we've learned over the years to be disciplined about. And then beyond that, I think it's important for us that the AI model that is being deployed, that's going to change. It's going to go from one model to another. It's going to go from 3 to 5 to 10 models. And the conversation around buying governance at the C-suite cannot be tied to the ROI on the random set of AI models that the hospital's clinicians happen to want today, right? There needs to be an awareness of the cost and of the friction more broadly around AI, and their current inability to actually get to more than 2-3 AI tools because of all those costs that justify Ferrum and justify why they work with us as a partner, why they bring us in to help them with those problems.
Let me go back to what you were saying earlier about, there are two types of potential customers or clients. One that really want to do something with AI, and others that are just talking about it and finding excuses not to do it. What have you learned, or what do you do to tell the difference between those two, and how do you adapt your approach to, because obviously your time is limited, your team's time is limited as well, and obviously you wanna care for all of them and you wanna serve them all, but you have to differentiate your approach?
Honestly, it's not hard. I think literally just asking, hey, like you took the meeting, like why are we talking? It's enough. And they'll either tell you, like AI is a strategic priority for us. We know that we need to be deploying these tools. We don't have the resources to do so. Like that's why we're talking. Or, they'll say something much less exciting, but it's not hard. Like people know who they are. They're not trying to be who they aren't. And I don't think healthcare organizations that are conservative are shy about being conservative. I think that they're very appropriately proud, but that also means that they aren't always the best partners for us to be launching with now. Yeah. I think that's going to change, right? I think everyone's going to have to recognize AI as a strategic competency over the coming years. There's just too much at stake in terms of cost, outcomes, and expectations from patients, honestly.
Yeah. Final question before we wrap up. So looking ahead, if you think about the next 2 to 5 years, what are you most excited about, AI in the healthcare industry? What are kind of your top 2 or 3 predictions of what's going to happen?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the Sukis and the Bridges and a lot of these agentic models that are coming out. And I mean, we've been through this before. There were AI point solutions that were coming out. It was breast imaging, lung nodules, back 5-7 years ago, that were the main use cases that people were adopting. And everyone was kind of trying to figure out, hey, do I go with a Bridge, or do I go with Nabla, or do I go with Ambience? Like, which one of these breast AIs do I go with? Which one of these lung AIs do I go with? And I think that with DeepSeek releasing an open source model that's just as performant, with the explosion in number of agentic AI companies that are doing everything from helping with patient loneliness to summarizing charts for clinicians to automatically scheduling patient, like there are rapidly approaching just as many tools in the agentic and generative AI space that need just as much governance and consolidation as the previous generation of diagnostic and clinical tools. So I think what I'm excited over the next few years is this shift in mindset of the industry from looking at point solutions in AI, looking at documentation or note summarization or scheduling AI, to a realization that, hey, like all these models are going to be running off of open source AI models that need GPUs to run. We're going to start moving away from sensitive healthcare workflows running in open AI, because I just don't think hospitals ultimately are going to want that. And you're going to need to have governance, monitoring, orchestration, security, all the capabilities that we've built at Ferrum for the diagnostic and clinical decision world. Those are necessary for the generative and agentic world. So I feel like you're seeing a consolidation of AI infrastructure into the hospital systems, client cloud or client infrastructure environment. And I think that you're going to see AI governance start to unify as well. Like, they're not going to care if an AI model is being used in a administrative workflow, back office, productivity, or if it's being used on the front lines of patient care. Like, it's an AI model that needs to run on GPUs, needs to be monitored for outcomes, and needs to be deployed on my population. That I think you're going to see a unification of that, and hopefully we're the ones driving it, because I think that the world's going to progress a lot slower if we aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. Pelu, thank you so much for your time today. This has been super, super interesting. And I think that Ferrum, it's well positioned to be the enabler to, help hospital systems and health systems, like really, make progress with AI. So I wish you, the best of lucks and all the best. And also I want to thank everybody else for listening and watching today. So thank you so much for your time today. You have been very generous. Thanks.
Thanks, Rodrigo. Really a pleasure.
Thank you so much.